Cody, what are some concrete steps that we can take to actually practice vulnerability-driven leadership?
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? Vulnerability is this kind of abstract feeling talk that we get out there, but there are some really big concrete things we can do. And I'll kind of show you the three different things you can do from you as a person, and then from you all the way up to your full organization. So let's start with, what can you do as a person? Just one-on-one with yourself, what can you do? A lot of this starts with reflection and brainstorming. So I think it's incredibly important, this is something I do and I work with other people, is to reflect on your emotional triggers. If you've got something that is kind of a hot button topic for you, it gets you heated, it gets you more emotional, you tend to lose a little bit more of your control, you need to be prepared to be able to handle that situation if it does come up. You need to be prepared to tell your team, hey, this is a difficult situation for me and I have trouble with it. So make sure you know what those triggers are beforehand, before they get out of control. These triggers are a wide range of things for different people. For some people, it's talking about money, talking about romantic relationships, talking about that one big project that you failed on. And you need to know what it is. For me, it's talking about directions. I like in a car, getting around town, I have the worst sense of direction on the entire planet. I'm so bad at directions. And I become so insecure about it because so many people mention it to me. And so when my partner brings it up in the car and I'm having trouble with it, I have to take a moment and be like, hey, like this is a really vulnerable moment for me. I'm really trying to get better at directions. I know I tend to get heated around this subject. I hope that we can form a positive communication now so that I can move forward and not take all my heat on you. So that's one big thing. The next that goes with this is you need to establish what you will share with other people before you actually share it. We don't want you just going into a room with your team and sharing every dark secret you have in your entire life. That is exactly the opposite of what we're saying. You need to go in and make sure you're being vulnerable in a relatable way, but also in a way that is relevant. Is it relevant to your work? Is it relevant to the job you're trying to get done right now? If it's not, then you probably shouldn't be sharing it. So make sure that you have that figured out before you go into that next big meeting. Now, part of this is, what can you do one-on-one with other people? And for this, I really wanted to point out some research that looks at this idea of a vulnerability loop. A vulnerability loop is this idea that if I'm going to be vulnerable with John, it takes both of us to create this loop. So I'm going to tell John, hey, I feel vulnerable about this, and here's something I'm feeling a little shame of, and I really need help with it. And then John, you have the option of saying, hey, that's really hard for you, and I'm here to support you. Or you have the option of saying, boo, you suck, get out of here. So John, what are you going to do with me here if I open up to you?
I mean, it probably depends on the state of mind I'm in. I guess maybe it would depend on how you approached me with, the type of information. I mean, just very frankly, honestly, like maybe if I'm not in the mood, I might not be in the mood to hear it. I don't know. Maybe it matters, like, I guess the setting. I mean, that's my first reaction, Cody.
Yeah, 100%. So those are some great things to think about with this, right? Is that like, I shouldn't, if you're having lunch with your family, I'm not going to pull you away and be like, let me tell you about my weekend. That's probably not the best way to do this. But if I set up a time and you and I have an established relationship and I'm saying, here's a problem I'm having at work and I really could use somebody to talk to about it. If you signal to me that you're willing to listen and that you're there for me, then what happens is we start this loop. It's not just me opening up. You have to be there willing to listen. And then once you're willing to listen, you get this signal in your brain that says, oh, maybe Cody's willing to listen to me. And so you share something about yourself. And then from that, as soon as that loop is started, it explodes really, really quickly. We start to have this bond. We feel comfortable sharing with each other. We become partners and whatever goal we're trying to accomplish. But it relies on both of us, right? It's very fair for you to be like, hey, I'm busy, get out of my way, or I have all these other things to do, right? And so One-on-one, we have to be ready to do both. We have to be ready to start the loop, to be the person that opens up. But we also have to be willing to look around the room and say, who's trying to share right now? And that sharing isn't being reciprocated. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think, I mean, what I like, I think in what you're saying is, especially in the previous point, there's an authenticity. It has to be authentic, but at the same time, it can also, you have to balance authenticity with being strategic. There's a strategic release of information you have to also take into account, right? It's like these two things, and I think you can do both. Yeah.
100%. And that's hard for some people, but it is a matter of, we're wanting you to share. We really do want you to get your feelings out there, but it has to be authentic and it has to be relevant. You can't fake authenticity. You really can't, as hard as people try. But it also can't be about, how you got dumped 2 weeks ago and your heart is broken. That's not appropriate to the workplace, and it isn't going to help us reach our goal. So it's not going to be too helpful here, right? And I'll jump off to my final point here is what can you do as a group? What can we as an institution do? The biggest thing is that groups need to start signaling vulnerability as one of their biggest values and that they're open to it. So if you are a leader, you should come out and say vulnerability matters to me. Here's how it matters to me. Here's my story with vulnerability. You might have an email chain where you share videos by Dr. Brene Brown and all this other research that shows how effective it is at building our teams. You might call out when there's a certain employee who's doing a great job of being vulnerable and showing their weaknesses and being willing to ask for help. And then the second part of this is to encourage deep fun. Deep fun. And we've got all the links. You can check out all this research, what all this means in more detail. I hope you do afterwards. But deep fun is this idea that comes from this research that shows that if you take a team and you go camping, and you spend 2 or 3 days together, and you go through some stressful situations, you spend real time with each other, then that's going to be a lot better than just having a mixer where the same people who tend to talk to each other. We want to mix things up. We want to get people a little bit out of their comfort zone. And the big thing with this deep fun is that if you can get people to tell their stories, then that's going to help everybody start those vulnerability loops with each other. Because we as humans, it's hard for me to connect to a robot who sits next to me who I think of as a person who only sends emails all day long. But if that person opens up next to a campfire about their 10-year journey to this job, about the values that matter to them, about their family, then I'm going to have a much easier time opening up to them and starting this loop and getting us all into this whole culture of taking on challenges honestly.